Ube. Tarawangan ni.
Ay, pagka-disturbo kayo ng phone.
Okay, point. Na, sunod na lang bro. Pwede ka niyo. Bro, para sa mga tubangan.
Pagkaroon mo din kita daw.
Ay, dan. Pabog na din na mo. Ano ba?
At na-spot na kuhan pa rin. Pagkaroon lang makamas.
Good evening, everyone. I am Joji Lagaras. I am from the fourth group, and I am covering the topics rules and functions of United Nations and the challenges of global governance in the 21st century. But before that, let us know what is United Nations, when and where United Nations started, who created United Nations Organization, why United Nations Organization was formed, and how it is started. So what is United Nations Organization? The United Nations is an international organization or association founded in 1945 after the Second World War by 51 countries committed to maintaining international peace and security, developing friendly relations among nations, and promoting social progress, better living standards, and human rights. When and where United Nations started? United Nations Organization was founded on October 24, 1945 in San Francisco, California, United States. So who created United Nations Organization? President Franklin D. Roosevelt and British Prime Minister Winston Churchill issued a declaration signed by the representatives of 26 countries called the United Nations. So the United Nations was a term coined by the U.S. President Franklin D. Roosevelt. So, belief in fundamental human rights, justice and social progress, and the value and dignity of the individual. So, almost all countries in the world are members of the United Nations, and there are currently 193 countries in the United Nations. Why United Nations Organization was formed? To maintaining international peace and security, developing friendly relations among nations, and promoting social progress, better living standards, and human rights. So, United Nations Organization was formed for collectively preserve peace, promote international cooperation in economic and social affairs. How it is started? As World War II was about to end in 1945, nations were in ruins and the world wanted peace. Representatives of 50 countries gathered at the United Nations Conference on International Organization in San Francisco, California from April 25 to June 26, 1945. For the next 2 months, they proceeded to draft and then sign the UN Charter, which created a new international organization, the United Nations, which it was hoped would prevent another world war like the one they had just lived through. So it was started and was formed to prevent war in the future because during the World War II, they failed at keeping peace and lost several key members and caused enormous destructions and left large parts of the world in ruins. That's why they formed new organization and resulted to the establishment of United Nations Organization. So this was the functions of United Nations. It aims to maintain international peace and security, protect human rights, deliver human aid, supporting sustainable development and climate action, and upholding international law. So United Nations also works to resolve international conflicts, influences policies, and preserve peace through cooperation. So nations to commit themselves to unite and live together in peace. So there are mainly 6 principal organs established by the Charter of the United Nations, which helps in solving disputes and act on matters concerning humanity. So the organs are the General Assembly, Security Council, the Trusteeship Council, the Economic and Social Council, the International Court of Justice, which is commonly known as the ICJ, and the Secretariat. So the first one is the General Assembly, or the United Nations General Assembly. So it is the only body in which all United Nations members are represented. So the General Assembly exercises deliberative, supervisory, financial, and elective functions relating to any matter within the scope of the United Nations Charter. So its primary role, however, is to discuss issues and make recommendations, though it has no power to enforce its resolution or to compel state action. Other functions include admitting new members, selecting members of the Economic and Social Council, the non-permanent members of the Security Council, and the Trusteeship Council, supervising the activities of the other UN organs from which the Assembly receives reports, and participating in the election of judges to the International Court of Justice and the selection of the Secretary General. Decisions usually are reached by a simple majority vote. So, on important questions, however, such as the admission of new members, budgetary matters, and peace and security issues, a two-thirds majority is required. So, the United Nations General Assembly is the chief authoritative organ and the only universally representative body of the United Nations. So, ang iyang responsibility is broadest. So, it addresses matters ranging from war and terrorism to disease and poverty. So, matters coming under the United Nations Charter are also being discussed sa pag-decide sa international peace and security, sa pag-approve sa budget sa United Nations. So sila pod ang mag-receive og consider reports gikan sa Security Council. So all UN, United Nations General Assembly, all countries small and large, one vote in the same say. So equal rights to decide. So every member nation has a seat at the General Assembly. Og ang member states committed to follow the Constitution of the United Nations. So the central topics in the United Nations Charter is peace and security and human rights. So ang General Assembly will held only when the world peace is threatened, where it is called the Town Meeting of the World. Second is the Security Council. This branch is the most controversial, so the most powerful branch og they are to maintain world peace. So they are in charge to maintain world peace. So kung naay threat, the council asks the concerned parties to reach an agreement by peaceful negotiation. But if it leads to a misunderstanding between the parties, ang council will impose sanctions, or they tries to secure a ceasefire through negotiation. Here, aya ra ka maka-issue og desisyon kung they reach the required vote of 9, apil na ang 5 permanent members nga China, Russian Federation, France, Ukraine, og United States. So nga naman, because if any of 5 permanent members disagree, the resolution will not be passed, which is mao ni ang ginatawag nga veto power. Veto power, so they have the right or the power to refuse to approve a bill or joint resolution. Third is the Economic and Social Council. So this principal organ is considered to be the heart of the United Nations system. So it is because it is the central United Nations forum for economic problems and social issue. So for example, sa trading, economic development og mga balaod sa kababaihan og sa children's rights og sa crime. So they are also focusing sa sustainable development, mao to ang sa expansion of trade, economic growth, and social unity. So the fourth one is the Trusteeship Council. So The Trusteeship Council was designed to supervise the government of trust territories and to lead them to self-government or independence. So this is also a principal organ but has been inactive since 1994. So the last to do was the Palau. So here, they are responsible for preparing trust territories. So countries that were formerly under the control of sovereign colonialists for proper injury into the community of independent states. So to sum up, it aims in helping countries under foreign rule to attain independence. So these were for former colonies or dependent territories. Next is the International Court of Justice. So the International Court of Justice, commonly known as the World Court or the principal judicial organ of the United Nations, through the court's origins predate the League of Nations. So, ang International Court of Justice is to settle in accordance with international law. So, legal disputes submitted to it by states and to give advisory opinions. So, they give advisory opinions referred to it by authorized United Nations organs and specialized agencies. So, if ang member refuses to recognize the authority of the court, the matter may be brought to Security Council. So, ang International Court of Justice, so it functions in accordance with its statute or written law or written law nga passed by a legislative body or the lawmakers mao to ang General Assembly. The last principal organ is the Secretariat. So, the Secretary General, the principal administrative officer of the United Nations, is elected for a 5-year renewable term by a 2/3 vote of the General Assembly and by the recommendation of the Security Council and the approval of its permanent members. So Secretaries General usually have come from small neutral countries. So the Secretariat influences the work of United Nations to a much greater degree than indicated in the United Nations Charter. So it is responsible for preparing numerous reports, studies, and investigations, in addition to the major task of translating, interpreting, providing services for large numbers of meetings, and other work. So it is the administrative work of the United Nations. So it is done by the Secretariat. So the administrative work of the United Nations is done by the Secretariat. So it is responsible for drafting of official documents and preparing budget voted on by the General Assembly. So it is an office or people nga responsible for the management of an organization, especially an international environment. The next topic is that so now we will be dealing with the global governance in the 21st century. But before we proceed with the main topic, I would like to give an introduction about how the state became the subject of interest to most scholars in global politics. So, first is the state is considered as an institution that creates warfare and sets economic policies for a country. More than that, it is considered as a political unit that has authority over its own affairs. So, we also consider that a state has a boundaries or borders that are recognized by other countries, and because of globalization and politics, there is a notion of an atmosphere like sovereign state or state sovereignty and a nation state. So, government control and state economic policies that has been challenged from all sides. So, in addition, I would like to give an emphasis about the borders or the boundaries of a certain state. So, meaning, if nai borders or boundaries, they are in charge or they have the authority of what is going to happen in a particular country. Now, we will be proceeding with the main topic, which is the challenges of global governance in the 21st century. So, we have the series of factors behind the emergence of the global governance in the 21st century. We have 5 factors. First is the declining power of nation states. Second would be the vast flow of all sorts of things that flow into and through various nation states. Third is the mass migration of people and their entry, often illegally, through various nation states. Fourth is the horrendous events with the nation states. And the last one is the global problem that a single nation state cannot hope to tackle on their own. So the first one is the declining power of nation state. So it has been said that if the state become highly contingent or influx, then there will be a possibility of some form of global governance in order to fill out those void. So, but of course, we have evidences behind the declining power of nation states. So we have four evidences. First is First would be the national government increasingly face problems that are too big for them to handle with. So, what are those global problems that it would include? So, international terrorism, drugs, environmental problems, and of course, global pandemic that has become a threat to humankind, and that would be the recent problem right now, which is the COVID-19. So, second evidence would be the United Nations and the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. So, because of this, it actually limits the power of a certain state to restrict the freedom of individuals. So, if you're aware of the genocide and its meaning, that would be the killing of a particular group or race of people. So, it is the mass ang genocide is a mass killings of large groups of people. So, massacring hundreds if not thousands of innocents. Third is the global social movement or the green movement. This include those multinational or transnational corporation and also include those largest banks that tend to overpower the authority of a state to a particular country. The fourth evidence, which is the limited power of the nation state, that could actually create change. So it becomes very limited. So good example for this would be the war in Iraq. So if you're aware of it, so even though the United Nations would not back up this powerful nation, still they would continue to initiate the war. The second factor would be the vast flow of all sorts of things that flow into and through various nation states. So this could involve the flow of digital information of all sorts through the internet. It is difficult, if not impossible, for a nation state to stop such flow in any case. It is likely that such action would be politically unpopular and bring much negative reaction to the nation state involved in such an effort. So, for example, China's periodic efforts to interfere with the internet have brought great condemnation both internally and externally. So, with this, we consider the internet is a medium for the digital flow of information. It helps people to become more informed, more aware of what is happening in the society. So, if you're aware of the Great Firewall of China, actually, they created or exerted an effort to in order to have this kind of system to filter information of what people can only see online. So, they have this periodic effort kay ang internet nagdala siya og negative reaction to a nation state China. So due to the negativity that it could bring to that country, ang China and the other authoritarian government na sila ingon ani nga strategy in order to seek out control for the flow of information. So mao to ang IP blocking. So IP blocking is all about controlling what people upload. So every computer has a unique address. So this address it is called IP address. So in China, every one of them is monitored. So if they detect something they don't like, so everything from that particular computer is blocked. So when it comes to controlling what people download, there is events number sa keyword filtering. So that little address bar at the computer or the top of your browser, whole internet pages, search engines or search engines like government, they can scan what you type in. So they're looking for keywords. There are also two strategies uh, to the second factor, no? First is to induce fear, like over censorship or giving punishment. So second is the flowing strategy or the discourage of access to information in the flooding strategy, wherein we will distract the citizen with other kinds of information. So kining a strategy will actually discourage to access to information and limit what people can see online. So mausad niya ang disadvantages. Of course, it could lead to spread of fake news and identify thief, which is taas ang control sa authority over the internet, kay na disregard nila ang freedom sa mga tao to verbalize, to speak out their opinions regarding the particular issue. So murag na-restrict ilang freedom of speech tungod ang China, they want to filter out informations that they consider dangerous for their country. The third factor is the mass migration of people and their entry often illegally through various nation states. So if the state is unable to control the flow or those people who will enter a particular country, then there will be a need for some form of global governance, kay ang mass migration sa tao, they could become a threat to other people living in that local or in that area. So it is said also nga we have the flow of criminal elements and their products like laundered money, drugs, people trafficking, or those people who are sold and both in sex trafficking. So it was a strong factor nga that would call for some need of global governance in order to have some form of order, so or the authority that would actually improve humankind or the life of the people. The fourth factor is the horrendous events within nation states. So kini usa po siya sa mga issue to call some form of global governance. So if you're aware of what happened in Darfur, Sudan in 2003, the rebels launched an insurrection protest against the Sudanese government because of putting disregard to the non-Arab population in the western region. So due to this, ang response sa mga Arab militias or the Janjaweed, so they give authority to this Janjaweed to fight against the rebel. Pero napasobra ang power or authority sa mga Janjaweed. So for this reason, they even terrorize the civilians and prevent the International Association or the United Nations Organization from bringing food, medication, or medical supplies dito nga country. So it will result in humanitarian crisis where people become affected not only internally but also externally. The fifth factor is the global problems that a single nation state cannot hope to tackle on their own. So the best example would be the global financial crisis. So the global financial crisis and panic that brought the world periodically during that time, some of the state that they would resort to some form of global governance in order to help them deal with their problem, and that would offer a solution to their problem because nay country nga belong to the third world country. So they could not stand on their own. So syempre, mas ganid sila tabang that would help them solve their problem. So that's end with my discussions. I hope you learned something.